The main aspect with video streaming is the ability for remote viewing. It doesn't really benefit, or there are benefits for the officer. A lot of what they communicate over the radio can then be seen remotely. Picture paints 1,000 words. So currently an officer, if they deal in a pursuit of a vehicle potentially, they'll be talking about the state of the traffic, the weather conditions, whether the road is slippery, the light conditions, and they'll be giving a constant running commentary of what the target vehicle is doing and how that is working in conjunction with ordinary members of the public. The ability to view that image remotely to the control room inspector, who is ultimately has the final say of what happens with that incident, whether we continue, whether we stop. They're getting a lot more information on a fast-time basis, and when we've been doing the trials, the latency is sometimes well under a second. So it is real time, it's not delayed of 15 seconds between what happens in the real world and then what's actually being seen in the control room. So it's very much a fast time application. Real world, it's still going to be a conversation between the crew and the inspector as to whether they call off, because the image is a letterbox into that world. It doesn't say what's going on around the police vehicle, what potentially can be seen further on the road. Other applications that could come from it with a pan, tilt and zoom camera that could be mounted on top of the vehicle. Again, it would need no operation by the vehicle crew, could turn up at the scene. It would then give those in command remotely the ability, and we've proven it with another camera that was in Airwave's server room, that you can control the pan, tilt and zoom remotely 24 hours round the clock. So vehicle drives up to a scene, the crew gets out, deals with the incident as they normally would, communicating, but the commander's got the option then to view the scene, and depending on the camera options that were plugged into the system, they would potentially have a full 360 view from that police vehicle.
The key thing for me is very much around, so we've spoken about the technology, but quite frankly, even I have to admit this on an honest moment, it's pretty boring. Yeah, it's pretty boring. It is a piece of technology that does some magic with some sims to actually be able to aggregate the bandwidth in order to be able to create sufficient bandwidth to be able to do things in the field that otherwise you could not do. It's capable of doing that across mobile networks. It's capable of doing it across Wi-Fi. We're already testing the capabilities with the 4 boxes and using LTE in there as well, so we can spread across all of those things. But this is what is all really important about it. This is what I'm going to hand over to Andy in a second, because this is what, for me, it's all about. So in Hampshire Fire, I'm not going to talk about Surrey Police here because I'd rather have the expert talk about it, but in Hampshire Fire, we have a vehicle which is used for managing major incidents. And what happens is you deploy the vehicle if you have a major incident, and that becomes their remote command and control. This gives them effectively a remote office in that command and control environment. We are working with an ambulance trust at the moment to try and find out what applications we can deploy with them. What can we do in an ambulance? I was talking the other day to somebody, and they said, this is a true story by the way, and it was I shall leave the ambulance trust out because it would be perhaps inappropriate to quote them, and it was a non-exec director of an ambulance trust. And this person said to me, she said, look Eros, it's kind of like this, mate. One of the problems you have in an ambulance is that sometimes you have to go and deal with collecting patients who need to have a consultant's appointment. And this ambulance trust had a particularly challenging geography, so that should give you a pretty good clue. And said, look, here's the problem. I get my ambulance, I put an ambulance driver in it, I send them to the patient's house, which could involve going over tolls, along bridges, ferries, that sort of stuff. They eventually get to the patient's house. They pick the patient up and they put the patient in the back of the ambulance. This is not a blue light thing, by the way. This is a pre-scheduled appointment. They then drive them all the way to the hospital. They take them out. They put them in the front of the consultant. They leave the ambulance outside, obviously. They put them in the front of the consultant. The consultant then has a look at them, decides what they're going to do. Then they put them back in the ambulance. Then they take them home again, and then they come back to the station. That is probably a day gone for that ambulance. And the question was, why can't I send the ambulance with an appropriately qualified paramedic type person in it, park it outside their house, put them into the ambulance, and have a remote consultation with a consultant, put them back in the house, and then go, because the quick mathematicians in this room will have already worked out I have now done half the distance. So you can see how what we're trying to do here is to really explore how these different things can bring different benefits. I'm not here today to suggest to you that we've actually got anywhere near the end of the capabilities that this box offers. This is simply about putting that bandwidth into the vehicle so that we can open those opportunities up.
So we've always been, in the years I've been in the force, and the way I see it is a very forward-thinking, how can we get the best with the money we've got? And given the current budget restraints the whole country is under, not just us police, but individuals as well, getting the best amount of money for taxpayers give us to give them the service they deserve. So technology has a really firm place in that for us, because we don't have large numbers of staff, so that staff we do put out, we have to give the best kit we can to give the best service for efficiency purposes. Now the scenario to do with the ANPR car that we're going to see upstairs is, I think the initial concept, and anybody correct me from the Airwave team, is about our pursuit capability. You get an individual, say we're on the motorway, police car comes up behind, blue lights on, want you to pull over. It refuses. It picks up speed. And the reason this sat within my team is all of my team use advanced vehicles. They're all very highly trained drivers, and I don't say that lightly. They are very good, regularly tested and skilled drivers. The speeds go up above the speed limits. They have to make judgments primarily about the safety, A, of the driver and the other vehicle they're following, because we are responsible for them, and the other members of the public that are on the roads, the pavements and everything else. So whilst I'll be quite blasé when I talk, the bottom line is public safety is always the paramount. And this is where the video streaming comes in. The officer is driving, he's assessing everything that's going on, the environment he's in. He's also having to communicate all of this via Airwave radio back to our control room. Now, any time in our control room, we have what's called Ops 1, which is the duty inspector, who has oversight on everything that's going on in the county, and through his staff, or her staff for that matter, in the room, all the resources that are available in the county at their fingertips. They have the ultimate decision-making capability to say, stop, or carry on. And as things progress, other police cars will be involved, because in these scenarios, it's a lot easier to deal with vehicles that fail to stop the more resource you've got available. They may be hanging back, they may be up with the vehicle. There's a whole range of tactics that can be used. But again, it's only what can be communicated by word of mouth. And the adage, a picture paints 1,000 words, is brilliant. We can communicate so much more. Two bonuses. The officer in the control room can see what the officer in the car is seeing. Two, the officer doesn't have to talk so much on the radio, they can concentrate more on their drive and the other aspects of what they need to do during their job. There is a caveat that goes with that. Using the current cameras we're using, it's a letterbox view. So you get to see what you see on the screen. It doesn't tell you what's beside the car, what's behind the car. We're using currently static cameras on the trials that we've got at the moment. But there are options. Cameras that can be used, can be pan, tilt, zoom. One of the scenarios we've talked about that could be a future development should we roll forward with this. Take the incident of a firearms incident. Luckily in Surrey, very rare. Put a pan, tilt and zoom camera on a fixed dome on top of the car. Firearms officers pull up to the scene of an incident, they get out, they're dealing with the scene. Command staff back in the control room, and we proved it works quite happily with the system. Use the pan and tilt camera remotely, they can view the scene without having to get the officers to interact with the camera in any way, shape or form. So yes, they can make decisions about the scene. The other advantage is though, officer safety. They can get the appropriate support to them on scene without the vehicle having to ask for that to come forward.